swap the input shaft of an NP241 HD to an NP241 LD? Let's find out. Four-wheel drive low. I could walk faster. This input shaft from this NP241 HD, and then I need to install it in this NP241 LD because the output shaft on the LD is smaller ID and less splines than the HD, but I need the LD because my automatic had the speedometer on the tail housing. Alright, let's set this up on my camera, my trusty garage door. Alright, so this just sound check. What we got going on here is the NP241 HD has a larger, I believe 32 spline input shaft. The outer radius is the same size as on the LD, which came out of the automatic from the 97. This came out of a 2002, I believe. The 24 valve and the common rail were the same vehicle, same engine. We're going to tear apart the LD transfer case. First off, we need to remove the input or the front drive shaft yoke. I do have the right size. It's 1 1/8 inches. Cool. We need the big impact. My assumption is this packing's like a seal, so I'll need to get a new one there. It's a 15 millimeter. I need a 15 millimeter deep socket also. I don't have a damn 15 millimeter. Not the 1/2 inch drive. Yeah, I know you're not supposed to use chrome sockets, but I do. I don't care. This also has a bracket on top. We want to put that bracket back on top. This housing is different, so I might have to swap all the parts to run. An inch, 1.367, 1.752. So 1.752 on the main shaft, 1.747, 1.368. Yeah, they should be the same. We'll find out. Now, this is definitely different. So this has a spring and a cup washer. Goes onto the shaft on the shift rail. Okay, so this came in like this. Oh yeah, the different. It is different. The planetary gear set is on the input here. Oh, it's on the input there. But the difference is, is the PTO.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The PTO.
So this assembly.
You don't say.
Goes. So, if you see the difference, no PTO. You see the planetary gear set in there? So that has reduction. So the reduction's here, and the clutch and the synchro is here to operate the input. So that's how this rail allows you to do four-wheel drive low, or two-wheel drive low, with just changing out the shift assembly. But see, this assembly is different than that assembly. And you can see that this bracket's different. but let's see here. Oh yeah. So this actually slides all the way on. That looks the same. Yeah, that all looks the same on that side. Okay. I noticed there were some like tabs here that moved right here. So I don't know if those go all the way back. I don't know. We'll have to mess with that. There's 3 of them in there, the gold ones. So I want to see if, so this has to go on to here, and this has to come out, but we don't know if we'll be able to do that. So we're going to measure our lengths and the housing to the gears and verify that the gears are the same. That's what we're going to do now. Alright. Now it's just a Harbor Freight feeler gauge, nothing special.
All they are a cheap set of digital calipers
But it
from
gets
Harbor
the job
Freight.
done.
I didn't see the point on hearing all that noise.
2.688.
So what do you think about this new voiceover I'm doing?
2.308. .35. So yeah, it's definitely different lengths. So it doesn't look like I can use the PTO housing. I'm gonna have to remove the gear.
This is where I'm trying to figure out if this is going to work or not. It only takes another 20 minutes to figure that part out.
Because this length to this length was the same, but the depth is different. Let's see what the depth is here. To the split ring. .47.
For whatever reason, it took me quite a while to figure out that the PTO obviously was a larger case due to the fact that the PTO gear's in there. But going through this video, I figured I'd keep the measurements in there. It might be able to help somebody out if they had an issue with theirs or we're doing a similar swap or something.
Definitely longer. 5.82. Okay. Dang, I was hoping to use the transfer case PTO. Now, you know what? In the future, I'll save all these parts. In the future, I swap the parts back and bam, I can run it. Just need a different speedometer assembly.
Right about now is when I figured out that it would not work.
Because that's definitely shorter by an inch. And there's no gear inside there. Now there is a pilot bearing inside there. I wonder if the shaft is the same. No, because this needs to go into that pilot bearing, and that's not going to. 5.84 from the tip to the half. Yeah, this is over an inch longer. This assembly is definitely longer. And that shaft's going to go all the way through, so it's not going to work.
Bingo!
'Cause I think the PTO runs with the gearbox, with the transmission in neutral.
Incorrect. If the transmission's in gear, the PTO's in gear.
Just lift the RPM and then the clutch pack and all that stuff does the rest of the work. So to get this input into that housing, yeah, because that whole assembly has to stay with the LD setup, but I need that input here. These two halves will not go together. It's looking like I'm losing my speedometer. Those two lengths are different. The whole housing. The rear half is the same. but the shaft is longer because of the other half. So they do not interchange.
Due to the different lengths of the cases, you cannot swap between the front and rear case on the HD between the LD.
I will need that tail, so I'm going to lose my speedo. Cruise control. I'm assuming cruise control is right off of that signal, the speedometer signal. Now, I wonder if that tail can be drilled for the speedometer. Probably not. But it would have to be disassembled, which I don't know if I want to do all that.
If you know if the HD tail can be drilled out for the LD speedometer housing, that would be great. Let me know in the comment section.
Yeah, because that tail is different too. That tail has a plug on top and an extra bearing in there. Now I could have sworn those inputs swap. This is obvious. Okay, so that detent is for the vacuum to show that it's in four-wheel drive. Or what stage it's in four-wheel drive. From the rear, the bottom pin, that adjusts the detent tension on the shifter. The inputs are supposed to swap, so I'm going to have to do homework, verify the input swap, then I'll tear it apart, and then in the future, when I get PTO, I can swap parts back. Because the later model uses the ABS brake system. The 2002 uses the ABS system. I think after 98, they used the ABS speed signal for the speedometer. So that would need a computer and all that junk to run the standard output. Now I still do need a computer and stuff, and if I happen to come across one, then I'll get it, and I can always swap these parts later. But then that's a whole ABS system I would have to install, because I'm sure there's not going to be plug and play between the two models. It's still second gen. Actually, I think that's third gen that this stick came out of. So, if I can't swap the input shafts, I'll throw the other transfer case in, and we just get rid of the transmission or the speedometer, and I'll run digital. That's the pinion gear that came out of the LD. This is the HD pinion with the PTO assembly on it. So those two swaps, so the input shaft should be the same cut, because the gear on for the planetary is the same. The outer gear, which is, I believe, it wouldn't be your sun gear. Your sun gear is the center on your input, and then you got your planets, which are the small ones, and then your outer gear. I don't think they call it a universe. What do they call that?
It's a ring gear, buddy.
I don't know. But that outer gear is the same cut on the LD as the HD. It looks like so that sits on the LD, that sits higher, and there's grooves on this input shaft. So that groove's the same. We have to measure to verify that that'll work, because this is definitely a little bit different. Yeah, because this is going to be all part of the same shaft. Now, that one looks like it just might sit deeper, and that it's not a bearing. Looks like there's a snap ring here, so we got to pull that snap ring. There's a snap ring here, and then this should come out. This is the input shaft. This one came out of the HD. This one came out of the LD. I just pulled it out of the LD planet assembly and swapped it.
So this is the old one, this is the new one. I'm going to assemble the snap ring and then place it in the housing and see what we get. So once I remove that assembly, that's what it looks like inside. That portion right there is right here on this one. There is a bearing under that plate, just an oil bearing, or flat. It's not a roller bearing, it's just a standard bearing, machine bearing, I don't know the term, but we'll see if this is going to work. Might need a different bearing down there. If we look at the two, the housing looks the same. The bearing is definitely different, so I'm going to have to press out the bearings. But yeah, because this one's got a wider bearing than this one. So the wider bearing, I don't know, let's just drop it in and see what happens. Let's just set this up here.
The suspense is killing me. I just really want to know what's going to happen here.
Everything meshes.
At this point, we realize that it does work. You can swap the input from an HD to an LD transfer case. Yay!
So 0.56. You lost your tail light! It's definitely, oh yeah, it's definitely longer. So the LD, the snap ring, the distance from the snap ring to this face is different. Now let's put the LD back in. Yeah, it is definitely different. So, if you look at this distance, right there, the snap ring is the slot for the snap ring. Let me show you. Is flush with the bearing. So, this definitely has a wider bearing. So if we put the wider bearing on there, it should pull it back where it needs to be. But that's also going to affect the mesh. Because if I do this down here, oh, it's definitely a different size bearing too. Oh no. This bearing depth width is 0.639. And then the HD bearing depth is 0.914 roughly. I didn't put a straight edge on there, I just kind of eyeballing. So we're like 100,000th inch difference. Now that gap, let's see what 100,000th difference is. I went from 0.68 to point something, right? Yeah, we're like 0.58. It's like 300 thousandths. 300 thousandths difference. It's like down near a quarter inch.
Now if you look at this bearing compared to this one, that one's flush. This one's not. So they both do the same job. That one's just got a little bit more support. Depth-wise is the same. So, if that sits deeper because of smaller bearing. So if we swap bearings, because if I put this assembly in the LD, well, the bearings are different sizes. No, they're not. Shit, why do I keep saying that? Okay, so with that bearing there, what's bottoming out? Is it the shaft itself? Because if I put that in there with that much play, it's gonna come apart. Now, if I put that other bearing on there, what's going to be the difference? So I've got like a good 1/8 of an inch, more than 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch. Now, what I want to know, is I saw that there was a plug that needs to be changed. Now that bearing's going to be the same size. That plug is going to be a different position. Yep. Comes in a different spot. But depth-wise, the plug's right at the tip of that anyways. So that should be the same. Which, this all meshes properly. But what I don't know is how deep. Okay, so my guess, what I want to know is where is this bottoming out? If this doesn't sit on the bearing face, now that bearing could come out some. Is this bearing? My assumption is the planetary is bottoming out. Because there's no bearing here, right? That assembly, before that, this shaft bottomed out on the bearing. That sticks out a little bit further. Oh, but you know what? Look what I noticed. Look what I see here. They both stick out about the same. This one, I wonder if I just press it to length. So press that bearing out, press it into here, because it looks like to me, oh wait, there's a snap ring here. So both bearings extrude out the same length. With the bearing face on there, the full length, let's see what the full length is, because that's what's going to change here. Roughly to the bottom of the snap ring to the face of that plate. Oh, it's the same. It's the same. Bearings, swap the bearings, and that housing drops in here, and it should be all good. So it looks like we should be good with the input swap. That input back into the LD or the HD, put it all together, wrap it up. Okay, so that is the LD bearing, and that's the HD bearing. See the difference? You don't have to remove the snap ring because it'll pop. The bearing will slide out either direction. So I just put a big socket on it and popped it out. I used that big socket. It's pretty soft. I didn't use the press because I barely tapped it with a hammer and it popped out. And as long as you're pushing on that I'm not worried about breaking the housing. I didn't put a lot of force on it. I was barely tapping it. So I'm going to place this large bearing into the LD housing and then get on with this assembly. Okay, so the HD swap, input shaft swap, worked great. You do have to change the bearing, It all went together perfectly smooth. I just tapped it in, went around in circles until I got it started, got it halfway in, and then I put my big socket on there and just bam, just kept tapping it in, nice and easy. If it was a tight fit, I would have used the press. I do have a press over there, but I felt that I didn't need it in this case. It chapped right in, no big deal. I'm going to put this snap ring in next and then start assembling everything else. And it looks like everything will go back. Everything should go back smoothly, and I'll have a completed transfer case. I just have to get that seal. I have to get that seal, and I also have to get that output seal. And then we should be good. But I don't want to do the seal. I don't want to put it back together until I get the seals. So after I get this back together, I want to test fit everything, verify that it all fits, and then we will clean everything and put it all back together.
I hope everyone likes this video. I spent quite a bit of time on it. I hope this helps you in your quest to build different things that didn't necessarily go together from the factory. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot.